subscribe for daily sleep stories, and comment what story you want to hear next for a peaceful rest. Begin by taking a deep breath in and slowly let it out. Feel your feet relaxing, letting go of any tension. As the calm flows up to your legs, allow your body to sink into a soft surface. Relax your hips, your stomach, and gently let your back rest. Feel the warmth spreading through your shoulders and arms, then soften your neck. Let your jaw unclench and feel your face relax. With every breath, let go of the day and open your heart to a peaceful story. In the land of Egypt, the Israelites lived for many years. They were a strong people, but their hearts were heavy. The Pharaoh, the ruler of Egypt, feared the growing number of Israelites. He thought, if they keep growing in strength, they might turn against us. To keep them under control, Pharaoh made them work very hard, day and night. They built cities, carrying heavy stones as the sun beat down upon them. In the midst of their toil, the Israelites cried out to God for help. They remembered the promises made to their ancestors, and they held on to hope. Even in their darkest hours, they sang songs of praise. Those songs flew up to the heavens like gentle whispers on the breeze, asking for rescue. God heard their cries and looked upon their suffering. He chose a man named Moses to lead them out of bondage. Moses grew up in the palace of Pharaoh, but had a heart for his own people. One day, he saw an Egyptian mistreating an Israelite. In his anger, Moses stepped in and protected the Israelite. But his actions caused him to flee to the desert, away from the comfort of the palace. In the desert, Moses found a peaceful life, tending to the sheep and discovering the beauty of God's creation around him. He found solace by the quiet streams and in the gentle rustle of the trees. One day, as he was tending to his flock on a mountain called Horeb, he noticed a bush that burned with fire, yet it was not consumed. Curious, Moses approached the bush, and a voice called out to him, "Moses, Moses." He felt a sense of awe and removed his sandals before the holy ground. God spoke to him, assuring him that he had seen the misery of the Israelites. God said, "I will send you to Pharaoh to bring my people out of Egypt." With a heavy heart, when he reached the land of Egypt, he confronted Pharaoh. the words God put in his heart, saying, "Let my people go." But Pharaoh's heart was hard, and he refused. Day after day, Moses returned to Pharaoh with the same message, but Pharaoh would not listen. So God began to send signs and wonders upon the land of Egypt. Water turned to blood, frogs covered the land, and a darkness fell upon Egypt. Each time, Pharaoh would promise to let the Israelites go, but would change his mind when the trouble was lifted. This went on until the final and most terrible sign was given. God instructed Moses to tell the Israelites to prepare for their freedom. Each family was to choose a lamb, pure and spotless, and prepare a special meal. They were to mark their doorposts with the blood of the lamb, a sign that they trusted God. That night, the Lord passed through Egypt and spared the households that obeyed him. As dawn broke, wails filled the air as Pharaoh lost his own son. Finally, heartbroken, he called for Moses and said, "Take the Israelites and go." The people of Israel hurriedly gathered their belongings. They baked bread without yeast, for they did not have time to let it rise. With each family, they formed a large crowd, filled with hope and fear, leaving behind the land of slavery. They marched toward freedom, where they could worship God without fear. As they journeyed, they followed a cloud by day that shaded them from the heat, and fire by night that warmed them and lit the path ahead. God was with them, guiding their steps, leading them to the promised land. However, Pharaoh soon changed his mind. He gathered his army, chariots, and horsemen to chase after the Israelites. The Israelites, seeing the dust in the distance, trembled with fear. They cried out to God and turned to Moses, asking, "Why did you bring us here to die in the desert? It would have been better to stay in Egypt." Moses calmed them, saying, "Do not be afraid. Stand firm and see the salvation the Lord will bring." With those words, Moses raised his staff over the sea, and God parted the waters, creating a pathway of dry land. The Israelites began to walk through the sea, feeling the cool air and watching the walls of water rise beside them, trusting every step of the way. As they continued across, they looked back to see Pharaoh's army pursuing them. But God had plans for their freedom, and as the last Israelite stepped on safe ground, the waters closed back in, washing away the fear and the chains of slavery for good. Israelites stood on the shore, safe at last, and sang songs of praise to their God. This journey had begun long ago, but it was in this moment that their true freedom was finally realized. With hearts full of joy, they looked forward to all the promises God had in store for them. As the sun began to rise over the shores of the Red Sea, the Israelites looked back at the waves that had just saved them. With joy in their hearts and songs on their lips, they started their journey towards the promise of a new land. They felt the cool morning breeze as it whispered fresh hope into their lives. Moses led the way, guided by the cloud that moved slowly above them, keeping them shaded from the sun. The sound of birds chirping added to the sweet music of their journey, while gentle winds carried the scent of blooming flowers along their path. Each step felt lighter as they began to believe in the freedom God had given them. But soon their hearts were tested. As they walked, the roads became rough and rocky. The desert stretched out before them, and the bright sun began to feel too warm. The children grew tired, and the elders slowed their pace. They had left behind their old life, and now faced the uncertainties of the new. Some began to complain, remembering their past, saying, "Wasn't it better in Egypt? At least we had food and comfort." Their voices mixed with doubts, echoing the fears that had once held them in bondage. But Moses encouraged them gently. "Remember the mighty hand of God that brought us here. He will continue to guide us." His words were like cool water in a dry land, soothing their worried minds. He reminded them of the miracles, the blood in the Nile, the frogs, and how the Red Sea had opened before them. They remembered how, just yesterday, they had crossed on dry ground, and how God had saved them. The Israelites continued their journey, drawn by hope and the promise of a new beginning. As they marched forward, God's presence was always with them, leading them toward the land flowing with milk and honey. Days turned into weeks, and as they traveled deeper into the wilderness, the needs of the people grew. Their stomachs began to rumble. One morning, under the warm rays of the sun, they gathered around Moses, weary and hungry. "What will we eat?" they cried. "In Egypt, we had plenty of food to eat. Will we starve out here?" Moses listened to their worries and turned his heart to God. God God spoke to Moses from the cloud and promised he would provide for them. I will send you bread from heaven. Each morning, the people shall gather what they need for the day. With faith in God's promise, Moses calmed the people. As dawn broke the next day, the Israelites opened their eyes to a miraculous sight. Fine like frost on the ground was a white substance which they can't understand. When they saw it, they asked, "What is it?" Moses smiled and told them, "It is the bread that God has given you. Gather enough for each person." They collected the small, round pieces of bread, calling it manna. It was sweet and nourishing, just as God had promised. It seemed like a gift from heaven, giving them strength to continue their journey. Each day, the Israelites awoke to find more manna waiting for them. Their hearts filled with gratitude, they learned to trust God for their daily needs. God also provided quail for meat when they longed for more than just bread. At twilight, flocks of quail would fly low over their camp, ready to be caught. This comforting food filled their bellies and reminded them of God's love and provision. As they continued their journey, the Israelites faced other challenges, including the burning heat of day and the cold of night. But even through these tests, they relied on God's guidance. The cloud above them moved slowly during the day, and at night, a warm fire lit their path. God was always there, showing them the way. Despite all these blessings, there were still times of doubt. One afternoon, they reached a valley without water. The sun blazed down upon them, and the people began to grumble. "Why did you bring us here? Are we to die of thirst?" They cried. They felt desperate, as the dry ground appeared to be a reflection of their fear. Moses turned to God once again in prayer, asking for help. God told him to gather the people around a rock and strike it with his staff. He assured Moses, water will flow from it. Moses followed God's instruction, striking the rock, and suddenly, fresh, cool water gushed forth. The people drank deeply, quenching their thirst. Their complaints turned into praise, and they celebrated God's goodness in meeting their needs. The journey continued as they traveled through the desert, growing stronger with each passing day. They began to understand that this journey was not just about reaching a destination, but about learning to trust God along the way. praised him for his guidance and provision. As they walked, they often shared stories of their ancestors, remembering who they were and where they came from. They spoke of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and how God had promised them a great future. The Israelites began to feel a deep connection to their history. It gave them a sense of belonging and purpose. With their faith rekindled, they pressed on toward the promised land, hopeful and determined. They felt empowered, knowing they were God's chosen people. Each time they leaned on faith, their hearts grew lighter. With every step, they were not just escaping bondage, they were embracing freedom. At night, as they rested under a sky full of stars, they whispered prayers of thanks. Some sang softly, letting their voices flow like gentle streams in the night air. The stars shined brightly, as if to remind them of the promises made long ago, of the light that would guide them home. With dreams of the future lingering in their minds, they slept peacefully, knowing that they were on a journey that would forever change their lives. Each mile brought them closer to the land, filled with blessings, security, and love. As the Israelites continued on their journey, they were filled with a mix of hope and uncertainty. One early morning, the clouds drifted away, revealing a clear blue sky. But soon, in the distance, a new worry emerged. They saw Pharaoh and his army racing towards them, dust rising behind their chariots. Fear gripped their hearts as they realized the danger that was closing in. Moses stood before the people, feeling their anxiety. "Do not be afraid," he said softly. "Stand firm and see the salvation of the Lord. He will fight for you." Though the army approached, the Israelites' eyes were drawn to the sea ahead. It felt as if the sea whispered promises of protection, yet they stood at the edge, unsure of their path. The waves crashed gently against the shore, their movement steady and calm, unlike the turmoil inside the hearts of the people. The Israelites turned to Moses, their questions filling the air. "What will we do now? We can't go back, and we can't go forward." Moses looked up, his spirit calm despite the chaos around him. He knew that God had a plan. With his staff in hand, Moses stepped toward the sea, his heart filled with faith. He felt God's presence guiding him, making him strong. He raised his staff high and spoke words filled with trust. "O sea, part before us. for the Lord is with us." At that moment, the wind began to stir. It swirled around the people and blew fiercely, creating a path through the water. The waves rose high on either side, forming walls of water that sparkled in the sunlight. The Israelites watched in awe as the sea transformed. They felt the cool breeze from the open waters as they grasped their children's hands and took their first steps onto dry ground. The ground was firm beneath them, and each step felt like a step towards freedom. They looked back at Pharaoh's army, which was growing closer, but they didn't lose hope. They felt God's presence with them. As they walked through the middle of the sea, they could see the water towering over them like great walls. It was a sight both wonderful and frightening reminder of the power of God. Fish swam alongside in the clear waters, as if watching the miracle unfold. The path before them was lit by the sun and the warmth of God's love. On and on they went, through the parted sea, their hearts steadying with each step. They remembered the songs of joy they sang just days before, and how God had provided for them. Even now, they felt His guidance leading them toward freedom. Finally, the last Israelite stepped onto dry land. As they turned to look back, they saw the waters begin to churn and twist. Moses lifted his staff once more, and the waves returned, crashing down upon Pharaoh's pursuing army. In that moment, the sea roared like a lion, swallowing the fear that had chased them. The Israelites watched in disbelief as the water closed over the horsemen and chariots. They had been rescued, and their hearts filled with gratitude. As they stood at the edge of the sea, safe and sound, the people began to sing. With voices lifted in unison, they praised God for His mighty acts. "I will sing to the Lord, for He has triumphed gloriously." They sang of the miracles they had just witnessed, recounting how God fought for them. Miriam, the sister of Moses, took a tambourine and led the women in dance. They celebrated their freedom, clapping their hands and praising the Lord together. The joy was palpable as the air filled with laughter and songs of thanks. The sun shone down, blessing their celebration and warm hearts. Yet, as the songs faded, they remembered the journey ahead. They were not merely free, they were now free to follow God's ways. With each heartbeat, they felt a new purpose forming in their souls. They were the chosen people, led by God to the promised land. Moses gathered the people once more, reminding them of all they had learned. From this day forward, we must trust in God for every step. His words sank deep within their hearts, weaving a thread of faith throughout their journey. As they moved away from the sea, the Israelites began to feel the effects of the wilderness around them. The sun blazed above them, and the path stretched endlessly before them. They felt the weight of travel. Some began to wonder what lay ahead. Would the promises of God truly lead them to a land of rest and comfort? But in those moments of doubt, they looked back at the sea. The waters that had once caused fear were now a symbol of their salvation. They had crossed from bondage into freedom, and they would not turn back. God had shown them his love in their rescue, and his path would lead them to blessing. As the days passed in the desert, the Israelites continued to follow the cloud and fire that guided them. Their journey was full of lessons, as they learned not only to trust God, but to lean on one another. They shared their joys, fears, and hopes. Together, they learned what it meant to be a community chosen by God for a great purpose. At night, under the endless stars, they shared their dreams. They told stories around the fires, remembering how far they had come and how God had released them from bondage. Each story was a thread tying them closer together, building their faith and resolve for the journey ahead. With every sunrise, they focused on the promise of the new day. They understood that even the wilderness held beauty. Each blooming flower along the path was a reminder of God's goodness. Each gentle breeze was like a whisper from God, assuring them that they were never alone. And so they journeyed on, hand in hand, trusting in the God who parted the sea for them. Their hearts sang with hope, and as they followed the path laid before them, they began to see the land of promise reflecting in their dreams. Freedom, they realized, was just the beginning of a life filled with new possibilities. With peace in their hearts, they looked toward the horizon, ready for whatever lay ahead. The shadow of the sea lingered in their minds, a reminder of God's love and mercy that had brought them to this moment, on a journey that would continue to unfold